Ensay Winery is a small family-run winery based in the town of Ensay in East Gippsland, Victoria. It's 220 metres above sea level, northwest facing, on granite loam soils. We planted 5 acres of vines in 1992 and 93, and we opened our cellar door in 1996 with our first vintage being the 95 Shiraz Cabernet. Variety-wise, we've got Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Shiraz and Cabernet and a little bit of Merlot. These varieties seem to do fairly well here. Ensay it's a fairly small town, probably a population of only 120 people spread over in a rural setting, predominantly sheep and cattle, mostly cattle now. So the vineyards are a very new thing to this particular area. Climate-wise, we get very warm summers, dry summers and dry autumns, which are really good for ripening grapes.
Aside from the trial done in the USA, no one else in the world has used this system. How did you hear about this system of vineyard grazing? And why did you decide to try this on your own vineyard?
I first heard about the system of running sheep in the vineyard from an article that Kelly Mulville wrote in Australian Grape Grower magazine. It really struck a chord of running sheep all year in a vineyard. We've always run sheep in winter, as a lot of vineyards do, but once the vines start shooting, they're like lollies to the sheep and they love eating them in preference to the grass. So a system where strategic hot wires could be run and the sheep could become lawn mowers as well as preventing us from having to use herbicides really appealed to me. So on contacting Kelly, he was out here doing a talk and he managed to come up, and with the help of some of the electric fence people of Gallagher from New Zealand, they set up a trial block here which proved that effective. We converted the rest of the vineyard the following season. So it's 4 years now since we've had the vineyard under hot wires, using the sheep to control the grass as well as desuckering for us.
Explain how the system works and what benefits are being realized.
The system works by having these strategic hot wires which allow the sheep to graze under and also on the trunk of the vine. So they will eat the sward, which is normally mowed down by tractors, which uses time and tractor hours and compaction. The sheep, by forcing them into an area that's what we call cell grazed, it's fenced off, say, as an acre block or 2 acre block, the sheep are put in there in a reasonable number where they then eat the suckers or eat down the mid rows or under the vines themselves. So it's a fairly effective way of what things we used to do with chemicals and tractors and other machinery to do things such as desuckering and killing the grass under the vines.
Can you show us how the system works?
So to give you a bit of a rundown, we run 2 hot wires where we run, in this particular case, about 10,000 volts, up to 10,000 through each wire. They're placed about 3 foot to a metre above the ground level, and what it allows is the sheep will eat under the vine row, as well as these suckers as they come out during the spring growth. They will also chew those off absolutely neatly to the vine. So the idea is to stop them eating this section. The brackets we've used to keep the wires separated off the vines are a standard Gallagher electric fence bracket, which is used for fences. We have it permanently fixed there, and it creates a gap of about 350. So it creating a nice gap between the vine, so the sheep can get into this area but not too close to this one. The system is still evolving, we're still learning. These Gallagher fence monitors put in line on each block, which feed back to the main electric fence unit in the shed. What they do is they indicate if there's a fault, so if a wire's dropped down or something, this will indicate back at the shed that I have a fault at such a block. It'll be Chardonnay block number 1 or Shiraz block. We also have these flashing lights which always flash if the voltage is above 4,000 volts, and 4,000 volts is about the threshold. Once it goes below, the stock will push through that. It doesn't seem to. So we have these tools in place just to make it easier for when we do have a fault, which can be frustrating to sometimes find. We run Dorper sheep, which is a hair sheep which has nice big ears, so when their head gets in around the electric fence, they get to feel it better than, say, a full bull sheep like merino. We have used merinos and they've been successful provided you've got good voltage running through them. So we have not put a herbicide out in the vineyard since 2012, and we haven't done any physical or chemical desuckering. It's all been done by the sheep. We do what's known as cell grazing, so we force the sheep into a particular block, make sure they eat it all out before moving them on to the next one.
Was there a certain amount of risk with implementing this system?
There was a risk factor in it, but understanding what sheep have done over the winter periods, it just seemed like why hadn't someone thought of this before type of idea. So I sort of leapt at it, and so far it's proved very, very effective.
What has been the effect of using the grazing system on your quality of life, say the ease of farming or the workload?
I think there's always benefits and learning curves for everything you do. I'm not saying it's a perfect system, because you do go from being a viticulturalist or horticulturalist to working with animals, which has its moments. They don't always want to do what you want them to do, so there's been learning things there which take you away from doing your viticulture. But in a sense, it's added a new dimension to the vineyard, where we're trialling a system that's fairly unique, apparently, worldwide. And by putting the animal component in, you're doing two things. Instead of just growing grapes, you're also running some sheep, which we also use for their meat. So I think as a system, it's added a lot more interest to just what we've been doing for the last 20 years or 19 years. It's added a whole new component, which I find very challenging and interesting, for sure.
Do you believe that this system can be used on a larger scale?
I think this could be used in a larger scale, but it's probably got to be modified a bit in the brackets that are required for harvesting, mechanical harvesting. But there's no reason why larger scale vineyards couldn't or won't do it. There is an infrastructure cost, and there's also the thing, like I said, of animal husbandry, which you have to learn about. But relationships could also be formed with other sheep farmers in a larger scale, where they could bring sheep in if the infrastructure was in. So probably there's no reason why it can't be adapted to larger scale vineyards.
What economic or ecological benefits have you seen or experienced so far?
It's economically, I would say, an example is this last growing season, which was fairly wet. We would have saved 7 tractor passes, and that being 3 herbicide passes, at least 2, and probably 5 slashing passes over the growing season. we don't do that now. So that's in tractor hours, diesel, compaction, all those things. So there's an economical benefit there, as well as a good benefit for the vineyard. Tractors not driving all the time through, and especially in the wet season where you can get bogging problems and severe compaction. So there are benefits that I see, but there's also time spent working with sheep, which counters some of that. But to me, that the time spent working sheep outweighs the time we would have been putting herbicide and things out. So I see it's a great benefit.
Have you noticed any effects on the wine quality, good or bad?
Look, I haven't seen any effect on the wine quality. I think it's such a long-term thing. You'd have to be you'd be studying it for 10, 20 years to see what benefits there would be. But I'd have to say what we're doing would have no negative impacts on the wine, because of we're not adding extra chemicals or anything like that. So I could only see it enhancing rather than detracting from the wine. Not that I've seen anything to date.
Have you had any interest in this type of management from any other vineyards in the region or the country?
There's been a bit of interest from different vineyards, a few. Probably curious. They're fairly curious, because I think there's I think some can't quite comprehend what you're doing, that the sheep are in there all year and the actual benefits that they do have. But when you mention it to certain vineyard owners come in, they're quite surprised. So I think there's a genuine interest will take time, but as more adopted, more will see it, and that's how it'll probably get used in a bigger sense.
Why do you personally think people should give this a shot?
Some of the work that the sheep do in the vineyard would be what I regard as some of the most non-enjoyable work in the vineyard, and that to me would be desuckering vines, which is either done in a chemical sense or a physical sense of doing it. Now these sheep do such a good job at it, of chewing them off the trunks. That alone sells it to me, because it can be a really annoying job. And then when you see the other benefits that they're doing, such as them eating the grass and turning it into fat lambs, is quite enjoyable. Thinking your employees are actually end up on the table, some of them, as a meat product. But I think just those things alone, and thinking of how much time I save sitting on a tractor, all add to the thing of going, well, I think this is a good idea. And I do enjoy working with livestock as well, so I think it puts a real interest component into the actual vineyard. It makes it just a bit different of just pure horticulture.
What learning curves have you experienced with this type of management?
There's been a few learning curves we've experienced, in the sense of having to deal with livestock. They don't always do what you want when you want, so they will push through fences if they can, and they will. So just general livestock management, there can be some frustrations there. Probably a few things we've noticed now that we're not herbiciding at all. Certain weeds that were once knocked down by the knockdown herbicides that the sheep don't eat are appearing, such as blackberries. There can be an odd little blackberry bush popping up which once got herbicided, where now we actually physically have to go and either pull it or spot spray it. So we have learnt that, and the fact that they are sheep and they think like sheep and they'll always behave like sheep, which can be frustrating, but good as well.
Can you tell us more about the sheep and how they fertilize the soil?
the sheep we run are Dorpers, which are a South African breed. They're what's known as a hair sheep, so they shed their wool or their hair. They're a cross between an English Dorset Horn and another African breed, which has got a very fat tail, which is the hair component of the breed. We don't have clumps of wool lying around the paddock, because being a hair, it's a hollow fibre and it rots down, so there isn't piles of wool all around the place. So we don't have to crutch, we don't seem to have fly problems with the sheep. Another good thing of the sheep is we haven't fertilised, since we've had them since 2012, we haven't been fertilising at all. We've sort of been leaving it up to the sheep. So we get their manure, which is good, and then there's also the added thing of dung beetles, which come in and break down their manure and take it deep into the soil. So we've got a few things going on there which we're monitoring and having a look at, and we think very beneficial to the vineyard. So time will tell. We're only 4 years in, but so far the boxes are getting ticked in a positive sense. There's more positives than negatives.
How do your visitors react to learning about this type of vineyard management?
When we explain what we're doing, and that's an Australian first probably, and there's only probably 3 or 4 of us doing this system in the world, if that, they're quite taken back by it. But I think the thing that blows them away most is, like, why didn't people think of this before? Because it is, especially with the technology of electric fences, it really allows us to do this. And you think, you know, why didn't we think of this? We were running sheep in winter. You know, why didn't we try to do this before? But that's why I think it's people. It's like, this is great. So it really does blow them away when they hear what you're doing.
What kind of impact does running a vineyard have on your family?
A positive thing I've seen with this system of the sheep and the grapevines in a family sense is we have 3 boys, and it diversifies their skills a lot more. Like, they're having to actually work with sheep and animal skills as well as the vineyard. So I think it just broadens one's horizons a fair bit more and opens them up to other things, not just purely in a horticulture sense. So I see some of those benefits as really good for the family, and our kids have actually got involved in owning some sheep, which they then sell the lambs back to us, which then they spend on other things. So it's sort of got them involved in a way in the winery from an earlier age, of actually having a little bit of a business model going, and I think that's quite positive in a lot of areas for them.
What other projects have you worked on within the local community?
One of the other projects we're involved in is with the local P12 school, which is high school, primary school combined, and they have an ag course, and they've got a small vineyard in the back of the school. So they bring the grapes up here, and they use our facilities under our guidance to make wine, look at what we're doing here and what we're trying to do, and discuss it. So we end up making a barrel of wine for them, which we end up bottling under their name, and then they go and sell it at school functions and things to further their ag course. So there's some positives again of just the community's, you know, involved in this, like a lot of kids seeing different things, of whether it's the sheep things, and some things we get wrong, like I've put to the science department there about using laser lights to scare birds, and, you know, with the kids trying to set up a thing that flashes to annoy birds during the picking season. So we discuss a few of these things. We don't always get them off the drawing board, but it's a positive thing that they see in the sense of what we're doing. We're fortunate here to be a vineyard, which is agriculture, we're a winery, so we've become a manufacturer, and then we become a sales place of selling our products. So the kids get to see this whole process through, from in the lab areas to whatever, of what we're doing on a small acreage of land, and trying different things, innovative things such as the sheep in the vineyard.
Adoption of this practice has been relatively slow. In conclusion, what advice would you have for someone that likes the idea but is reluctant to change the way they currently manage their vineyards?
I would say, if you're inclined, because you think it's a good idea, do a sample block, have a crack. That's what we did. We did a small block just to see how well it worked. We were that pleased. Like I've said, we've done the whole vineyard. So I'd say if you're interested and you think it would suit you, have a go. But if there's any hints where you think it'd be more annoying than good, don't do it. So I think if you're inclined that way, just have a go. Maybe do a small sample first without doing the whole vineyard and see if you do like it.